My name's Talia Vo, 27, data analyst by day, peacekeeper by default. Christmas night was supposed to be quiet until it wasn't. The clink of silverware froze midair when she said it. Get out right now. No build-up. No argument. Just that. Her voice cut through the sound of the TV and the soft scraping of plates. I blinked once, twice, and asked, "Really?" She didn't even look up. For a second, time stalled. My fork hovered above the turkey I'd spent hours roasting, and something inside me, something small and patient, finally cracked. But I didn't shout. I didn't beg. I just exhaled, the way you do when a long calculation finally reaches zero. I wiped my hands, turned off the oven light, and said quietly, "Okay." That was it. No scene, no shouting match, just the clean sound of a decision being made. She kept eating, pretending nothing seismic had just shifted. I cleared my plate. In that silence, every unpaid bill and "I'll pay you back later" echoed louder than her words. By morning, I'd packed my laptop, my ID folder, and every proof of payment she'd ever ignored. At 9:30 a.m., I disappeared. No note, no goodbye, just absence neat, surgical. And that's when the calls started. First one, then 3, then 10. The same question over and over. Where are you? Because this time, the one who'd always stayed finally left. And what came after? Well, let's just say the silence didn't last long. If you've ever been pushed past your breaking point by the very people you love, tell me what finally made you walk away? Morning light pressed through the blinds, thin and colorless. I sat on the edge of my bed, shoes already on, suitcase open beside me. The house was silent, except for the low hum of the refrigerator, a sound that felt louder than any argument we'd ever had. I didn't think about the night before. I couldn't afford to. My mind had already switched into something colder, logistical, methodical, almost professional. One folder for pay stubs, one for receipts, one for bank statements. It was strange how easy it was to pack a life when you'd been the one paying for it. I moved room to room like a ghost with a checklist. Laptop, passport, spare keys, tax documents. Each drawer had something I'd bought, something she used, something I no longer wanted to fight over. The air smelled faintly of dish soap and leftover cinnamon. My hands shook only once when I unplugged the router. My name was on that bill. My card covered every month. Cutting the cord felt symbolic, like closing a valve that had been leaking for years. I transferred digital copies of everything to my cloud drive. Electric bills, mortgage reminders, screenshots of every transfer I'd ever made for the house fund. Data had always been my language. Facts, not feelings. And if I was going to disappear, I wanted proof of what I'd carried. I found my mother's handwriting on a pink sticky note taped to the fridge. Pick up cream cheese. The casual normalcy made my stomach twist. It was as if last night hadn't happened, as if get out were just another item on her grocery list. The clock hit 8:47. I zipped my suitcase. The final click sounded like punctuation and ending written without permission. I walked down the hall, the carpet soft under my sneakers, each step careful, quiet. I didn't leave a note. Notes invite replies, and I was done receiving answers that never meant anything. Outside, the air was sharp, winter crisp. My car engine coughed awake. I watched the house shrink in the rearview mirror until it became a line of windows reflecting the pale morning. For a few miles, I drove without direction, just movement, forward motion as oxygen. Eventually, logic overrode adrenaline. I pulled into a parking lot near a small coffee shop. My hands trembled as I opened my laptop on the passenger seat. Emails, statements, confirmations. Each tab I opened told the same story. Payments made, balances cleared, my name attached. I wasn't the tenant, I was the lifeline. I backed up everything into 3 separate drives, 2 physical, 1 in the cloud. I didn't know why I was doing it so precisely, it just felt like insurance against being rewritten. By the time the coffee cooled, I'd checked every bill account. Electric, paid. Water, paid. Mortgage autopay, my card. Then a different name flashed on the screen, an account I didn't recognize. Homeowners Association Vo Residence. The login email was mine, but the billing address wasn't. Curiosity pried the lid open. Inside the digital archive sat months of unpaid notices, each red-stamped, past due. I hadn't seen any of them before. Someone had been deleting the alerts from my inbox. A slow, heavy realization sank in. The house wasn't just emotionally unstable, it was financially collapsing too, and my name was tethered to the wreckage. I drove back, not to confront but to retrieve the last pieces of paper. The driveway was empty. Inside, sunlight cut through the curtains like interrogation lights. The kitchen counters were spotless, too spotless, her kind of spotless, when she wanted to hide something. I opened the mail drawer. Empty. I checked under the placemats, inside the utensil tray. Nothing. Something pulled my eyes toward the oven. Maybe it was instinct. The door creaked when I opened it. Inside was a stack of envelopes wrapped in a rubber band, edges browned from heat. The top one had my name printed in bold capitals, next to the words, "Past due." The silence in the kitchen became unbearable. I slid the bundle into my bag without opening it, heart pounding slow and deliberate. Outside, my phone buzzed once Owen's message. "You can crash here, no questions." I didn't answer. I couldn't yet. For the first time in years, I was completely, terrifyingly free. Freedom wasn't warm. It was cold, sterile, like walking barefoot on new snow. But it was mine. When I finally stepped out, the front door clicked behind me, locking automatically. I didn't look back. There was nothing left to collect except evidence. By midweek, the silence fractured. It began with one message and Aunt's polite question disguised as concern. Then came another, colder, clipped, demanding context I had no interest in providing. The pattern was predictable. Words from people who never called unless there was drama worth dissecting. They all wanted to know why I'd abandoned my mother. The phrasing was identical, as if copy-pasted from a script. She had written it for them, fed it to them, word for word, and they recited it without pause. I didn't reply. Instead, I stared at the phone until the screen dimmed, and my own reflection appeared: tired eyes, clenched jaw, a trace of disbelief. The woman they were describing didn't exist, but the one who did no longer felt obligated to defend herself. When I finally opened my email, there were more messages. Subject lines filled with pity, others with passive blame. "Family comes first. She's just lonely. You could have handled it differently." Each line tugged at the part of me still trained to explain, to smooth things over. But I'd spent years translating chaos into logic. I recognized manipulation when I saw it. I opened a new folder on my desktop. Evidence. Home. Inside, I dragged screenshots, electric bills, bank transfers, timestamps, all labeled. Every click felt surgical, the digital equivalent of truth on record. I built my defense not for them but for myself, to remember what reality looked like before it was rewritten. By afternoon, the gossip had spread further. My cousin unfollowed me. A friend of my mother's posted a vague quote about ungrateful children. It didn't name me, but it didn't have to. Aunt Chile finally texted a longer message, hesitant, careful. "I heard things, but I want to understand both sides." It was almost kind, almost fair. For a moment, I felt the impulse to pick up the phone, to explain, to start the exhausting process of earning credibility back. But I stopped. I didn't owe them a confession. I owed myself silence. Instead of replying, I uploaded a single link to a shared album, 36 images of invoices, payment confirmations, and a spreadsheet titled House Expenses, 2019-2024. The caption was simple: no story, just numbers. Then I logged off. The world felt oddly still, as if the noise had burned itself out. I brewed coffee in Owen's apartment, the air filled with something that almost resembled calm. But calm has weight, and I could feel it pressing on my shoulders. I thought about my mother, how she must have crafted her version with precision. She always understood timing, how to strike while sympathy was fresh. People believed her not because her story made sense, but because it was easier to pity a mother than question her. That night, I checked my notifications again. The album had been viewed 17 times. No comments, no replies, just silence, the kind that follows impact. I didn't need apologies. I wanted acknowledgement. Silence was close enough. I fell asleep for the first time in days, though my dreams were static, full of half-heard arguments and red warning signs. The next morning, I woke to the dull buzz of my phone. Another email. Not from family this time, from the Homeowners Association. The subject line read, "Outstanding balance, immediate attention required." My stomach turned before I even opened it. Inside was a detailed breakdown. Unpaid fees, penalty charges, notices sent over months. My name appeared on every document. There was a bold line at the bottom, final warning before account escalation. I stared at it until the words blurred. Somewhere in the house, my mother had been ignoring these, deleting alerts, letting the weight pile up under my name. The screen light reflected off the wall like water rippling in a glass. I thought about all the times I'd been told family was safety, that blood-guaranteed trust. Yet here I was, realizing that trust had been leveraged like credit and maxed out. I closed the laptop, heart thudding slow and deliberate. Outside, traffic murmured in the distance. The world kept moving, indifferent to my small revelation. I knew this wasn't over. But for now, I had proof, and that was enough to keep breathing. By Friday noon, the quiet stability I'd built started to fracture again. An alert blinked on my phone, bank overdraft notice. My first thought was mechanical, maybe a subscription I'd forgotten to cancel. But when I opened the statement, a new charge sat glaring on the screen: utilities linked to the old house, still under my name. The number wasn't enormous, but the meaning was. It meant she hadn't stopped. Somewhere in that house, my mother was still using what didn't belong to her. I felt my chest tighten, the familiar edge of disbelief that used to make me cry. This time, I didn't. I'd learned that shock could coexist with control. I opened my laptop, opened my files, and started documenting. Screenshots, reference numbers, timestamps, each one a breadcrumb leading back to her choices. The process was tedious, bureaucratic, impersonal. Yet every automated reply felt strangely human: emails that said, "We understand your concern." Small sentences that carried more empathy than I'd ever received from my own family. By mid-afternoon, I filled out an identity misuse report with the Federal Trade Commission. The form asked if I knew the offender. I hovered over the box. The cursor blinked like a question I didn't want to answer. Still, I typed 3 words: my own mother. For verification, I attached photos of the mail with my name on overdue notices. I kept my tone factual, stripped of emotion, as if this were just another project deadline. That's what kept me steady: the idea that order could exist, even after betrayal. The next step was the utility company. After 30 minutes on hold, a calm voice confirmed the accounts were indeed opened under my social security number. The representative used a phrase I couldn't shake: "You've been impersonated." It landed heavy, clinical, final. I followed the checklist, like ritual: request removal of liability, ask for written confirmation, save the document twice. By evening, my desktop glowed with a new folder titled Proof of Misuse. Then the phone rang. Her name filled the screen. I didn't plan to answer, but habit betrayed me. The sound of her breathing filled the line before any words did. It was shallow, rehearsed. I could almost hear her pacing, constructing the story she thought might still work. Her tone slid between tears and control, the kind that used to make me fold. Words I'd heard in 100 variations: how she didn't understand, how I was overreacting, how family shouldn't involve outsiders. The guilt was a script, and she knew every line. I let the silence stretch until her voice cracked. That's when I realized silence was more powerful than defense. I didn't owe explanations to someone who'd already rewritten history. When she hung up, I stared at the blank call screen. I expected anger, but what came instead was exhaustion. I was tired of playing the responsible one in a story I hadn't chosen. I wrote everything down: time, duration, summary. Evidence wasn't just paperwork, it was armor. As night settled, another vibration shook the table: an incoming call from Aunt Chile. I almost ignored it, but curiosity won. Her voice was softer, careful, threaded with hesitation. She said the family wanted to meet. To talk. That word, always a prelude to judgment. I agreed, not for reconciliation but clarity. Some truths needed witnesses. After the call, I opened my inbox again, one last check before shutting down. A new message waited. Subject: County Court Notice, Case Reference 1147-B. My pulse slowed to a measured rhythm as I read. It wasn't a threat, it was official. The county had scheduled a preliminary small claims hearing related to unpaid property dues. My name appeared again, attached as a secondary responsible party. The words didn't sting, they solidified. Everything I'd been gathering, every screenshot and affidavit, now had a place to go. I printed the document, stapled it to the folder marked Proof of Misuse, and placed it at the top of the stack. Outside the window, streetlights flickered on. Somewhere, the world was preparing for a normal weekend. But in my apartment, normal had a new definition: stillness, paperwork, evidence. I made tea, poured it into a mug, and watched the steam drift upward like a small, private victory. It wasn't freedom yet, but it was movement toward it. When I finally turned off the light, the folder lay open on the desk, my life condensed into proof, my peace built on documentation. In the dim glow of the computer screen, I saw my reflection, not angry, not broken, just awake. By Saturday afternoon, the air carried that heavy kind of quiet that always comes before something unpleasant. My aunt's house stood at the end of a long suburban street, every lawn trimmed with precision, every curtain drawn just enough to hide what was real. I parked outside and sat for a moment, watching my reflection in the windshield until it blurred. Inside, the warmth felt artificial, too much perfume, too many polite smiles. My aunt, Chile, greeted me with practiced kindness, her hands soft but her eyes cautious. She'd set out tea and small pastries, like this was a Sunday visit, not a tribunal. My mother sat near the window, posture perfect, face carefully composed. She didn't look up, but I could feel the tension radiating off her like heat. The others, two uncles, a cousin, and Nina occupied the remaining seats, forming a quiet semicircle of judgment. It was astonishing how people could construct entire stories without ever asking questions. To them, I was the prodigal daughter, the ungrateful one who embarrassed the family. To me, they were witnesses, not allies. I stayed standing for a moment before taking the only empty chair. The tea steamed between us, untouched. My aunt began speaking something about misunderstandings and healing as a family. Her words were gentle, but they carried an undertone of exhaustion, as if she already knew peace wasn't possible. I listened without reacting. Years of data analysis had trained me to separate noise from substance, and this conversation was mostly noise. What mattered wasn't their apologies or explanations. It was truth. When she finally paused, my mother exhaled like a performer reaching the climax of her act. I didn't need to hear her lines. I knew them. I'd written the counter-narrative in my head 100 times. But then something unexpected shifted. Nina, sitting small in her chair, stared at her hands. Her voice barely rose above a whisper, but every syllable carried weight. She said she'd known about the accounts, about the bills, about how our mother had been using my name for months. She said she wanted to tell me but didn't know how, that she was scared of being turned against like I was. The room changed shape. Every sound flattened, every face stiffened. My mother froze, a flicker of panic flashing through her eyes before she recovered her expression. No one spoke. For a long time, the only movement came from the clock ticking above the fireplace. I reached into my bag, not dramatically, just with purpose. From it, I took the folder labeled, organized, proof in paper form. I placed it on the coffee table, each document face up. Dates, signatures, amounts, evidence that needed no narration. I didn't explain. I didn't accuse. The facts filled the silence for me. My aunt leaned forward, scanning the pages. Her lips parted as comprehension replaced neutrality. The room's balance shifted again, quietly but permanently. My mother's breathing quickened. Her eyes darted from paper to faces, calculating the distance between pity and exposure. There was nowhere left to hide. I waited. Not for apology, not for understanding, just for the moment the truth finally became undeniable. It came in the form of silence. Not the passive kind, but the heavy, transformative silence that follows revelation. When my aunt finally spoke, her voice was small. She said she didn't know, that she was sorry, that none of them had imagined things were this deep. I nodded once. There was nothing else to say. I gathered my papers, placed them neatly back into the folder, and stood. No one tried to stop me. Even my mother stayed still, her control crumbling just enough for me to see the fear behind it. Walking out, the air outside felt cooler, thinner, cleaner. For the first time, the world didn't feel tilted against me. As I reached my car, my phone buzzed a single message. "You think this is over? You'll regret making me look like this." No signature. None needed. The words didn't sting. They confirmed everything. Some people don't want peace, they want control. I deleted the message without replying and started the car. The rearview mirror caught a final glimpse of the house still, small, suffocating. This time, I didn't look back twice. A week later, the morning felt colder than usual. Not in temperature but in tone, the kind of stillness that warned you something irreversible was about to happen. The courthouse stood plain and unremarkable, a 2-story building of beige stone and fluorescent light. Inside, it smelled faintly of paper and anxiety. I sat in the back row, folder in hand, eyes fixed on the floor tiles that never seemed clean, no matter how often they were scrubbed. People whispered, shuffled, adjusted their jackets. It was strange to realize that for most of them, this was just another errand, a traffic ticket, a rent dispute. For me, it was the final chapter. When the clerk called my name, I stood without hesitation. Years of holding my breath had prepared me for this small, sharp kind of silence. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined. No grandeur, no echoing benches. Just a table, a judge, and a stack of paperwork taller than truth itself. Across from me, my mother sat composed, every gesture calculated. Her nails were perfect, her hair smoothed into place. She looked like someone rehearsing for forgiveness. I didn't look directly at her. There was nothing left to see. The judge began with procedure case number, property code, outstanding balance. His tone was neutral, mechanical, mercifully detached. I placed my documents on the table: receipts, bank statements, email records, the FTC affidavit. He reviewed them slowly, glasses sliding down his nose, fingers tapping the edge of the papers. Then he asked a single question. "Were these accounts authorized by you?" I said no. My voice didn't shake. It didn't rise or crack. It just existed, factual, unbothered. I had already done my grieving elsewhere. The judge nodded once, marked something on the form, and turned to my mother. She offered explanations, but her words tangled too many. I thought, I didn't realize. We shared everything. He stopped her halfway. Facts didn't need stories. The ruling came faster than expected. The court recognized the misuse of identity and released me from liability. The penalties would transfer to the individual responsible. Her. No applause, no satisfaction. Just the sound of a stamp hitting paper and the case number being archived. That's what justice looks like when it's real. Brief, bureaucratic, clean. I gathered my documents, thanked the clerk, and stepped into the hallway. The sunlight outside was almost blinding, bouncing off the glass doors. I hadn't noticed the sky all week, but it looked different now, less heavy. As I walked toward the parking lot, a thought surfaced quietly. I hadn't won anything. I'd simply stopped losing. My phone buzzed once. A text from Nina. "She's leaving town. Said she needs a break. Don't know where." I read it twice, then locked the screen. There was no satisfaction, no vindication, just stillness. The kind that comes after a long storm when the air finally empties itself. At my car, I opened the folder one last time, then closed it. Evidence had done its job. It didn't need to follow me anymore. I placed it in the trunk, shut the lid, and stood for a moment. The courthouse doors behind me creaked open, spilling more people into the day, each carrying their own verdict. I wasn't angry. I wasn't relieved. I was finished. When I drove away, I didn't look back, not at the courthouse, not at the years I'd spent trying to fix what never wanted fixing. Some endings aren't loud. They're just final. Spring arrived quietly, without asking for attention. The mornings in my new apartment were slow and golden, filled with the kind of silence that didn't demand explanation. I'd chosen this place for its light wide windows facing east, where the sun unfolded gently across the hardwood floor. No noise, no memories, no ghosts. My life had reduced itself to essentials: a coffee mug, a single plant on the table, the hum of the city just far enough away to sound like breathing. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for something to happen. I was simply living. Work returned to rhythm. Deadlines, projects, meetings, all the normal things that once felt unbearable now seemed mercifully predictable. I liked the structure. It reminded me that order could exist without control. Sometimes, I still caught myself checking my phone for messages that no longer came. Old habits die slowly, but each time the screen stayed blank, it felt less like emptiness and more like peace. One evening, while sorting through emails, I saw a new one from Nina, just a few sentences. She said she'd found a small job out of state, that she was learning to manage her own finances. She mentioned that our mother had left town, maybe for good. No one knew where she'd gone, and no one was looking anymore. I reread her message once, then closed it. There was no need to respond immediately. Some things healed in silence. Afterward, I went for a walk. The neighborhood was quiet, framed by trees newly dressed in green. Children played near the park, their laughter echoing freely, the kind of sound that used to make me ache, but now only made me smile. Peace wasn't loud. It didn't arrive like triumph. It slipped in slowly, unnoticed, until one day you realized it had been there all along. I began keeping a journal again. Not to document pain, but to measure progress. Little notes: what I cooked for dinner, how long I walked before sunset, the name of the song that made me pause and breathe. They weren't milestones. They were proofs of existence. Occasionally, a memory would surface: her voice, her sharp tone, the feeling of always being one step away from blame. But memory had lost its edge. It no longer cut, it only observed. I stopped trying to assign meaning to what happened. Not everything painful requires purpose. Some things just are, and that realization was its own kind of freedom. Weeks passed, and I noticed something new in my reflection: softness. The kind that comes when forgiveness stops being an obligation and starts being a quiet decision. I hadn't forgiven her for her sake. I'd done it for mine. To stop carrying her shadow into rooms where she didn't belong. Sometimes people ask if closure is real. I think it is, but it doesn't look the way we expect. It doesn't come with apologies or justice. It comes when the story loses its power to define you. I didn't become stronger after all this. I just became clear. Clear about boundaries, about love, about how peace isn't something you find. It's something you create when you stop fighting everything that hurt you. At night, I light a small candle by the window. Not for ritual, not for memory, just as a quiet reminder that light can exist even when no one's watching. The world outside moves fast again. Emails, headlines, errands. But inside, I move slowly, deliberately. Every choice I make now belongs entirely to me. I think of Nina sometimes, hoping she's learning that independence isn't rebellion, it's survival. Maybe one day she'll find her own version of peace, too. As for my mother, I no longer need to know where she is. I've stopped trying to translate her silence into meaning. Some absences are better left unexplained. Before bed, I write one last line in my journal. Freedom isn't the noise of doors closing. It's the quiet of finally being alone without fear. I set the pen down, close the notebook, and breathe. The air feels light. Tomorrow will be ordinary, and that's the most extraordinary part of all.